from CJ on X. Is this the best the rest have been in the Premier League for a long time? Recent title challengers have felt miles clear of the rest, and the number of games they could slip up in has felt very small. This season seems like there could be plenty of twists and turns. Will this sustain? Lars, let's go to you first, being the charitable chaps that we are. Is this the best the rest have been in the Premier League for a long time?
Listen, I come in here determined to bring positivity and good vibes and things. I don't love the fact that the first question I immediately have to go into Captain Wet Blanket mode, but I do kind of think it's more about the favourite not really being that good at this point in time. I think it's more about Liverpool. Yeah. I think it's more, that Liverpool with all these shiny new signings still haven't, found their new dynamic, still haven't quite gelled together. City are in a bit of a rebuild state, and which is why I backed Arsenal to win the title. They're kind of the most solid one, but they also have some games where the attack just kind of doesn't fire. So, and I also think it's a little bit early doors. If we look at the ones that are near the top of the table, I mean, Bournemouth are phenomenal, but do we actually think pound for pound like they're great? But do we think they're going to last the distance? Maybe not. Spurs have gotten results without always looking super convincing. Love Palace, but I think there's a definite ceiling to what you can do with that squad, and I think
we know they're beatable now.
That's why Glasner's got one eye on the door, right? Because he knows there's only so far you can take this group. Chelsea are a mess, but have a lot. Well, they're not a mess, but they have a lot of really good players. But it's a little bit messy. So, listen, I think it's more about the biggest teams not being fully cooked at the moment. But I mean, the outcome is, if the outcome is that the league is more fun than usual, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I kind of really agree with what Lars is saying there, Jim. But do you?
I think this is a very October conversation, isn't it? And I appreciate why CJ's asking this question, because actually there are quite a number of teams where you think they are kind of, perhaps they've risen their own ceiling to the point where it's quite an exciting prospect. And Bournemouth and Palace are the two obvious examples, but there's quite a few teams in there who look good. And I think you throw the promoted teams, or certainly Sunderland and Leeds looking a lot more competent than the previous promoted teams have done for the last couple of years. And you think, it's actually quite unpredictable. But the true test of this comes when the games start coming thick and fast and the squads start getting tested, injuries pile up, fatigue piles up. Once the cup competitions start later on as well, and sort of truly get going, that will show if there are a number of teams who have got the sort of mettle to really sort of push this. I think there is a wider interesting thing happening within the Premier League, which is that it's the quality of what people last season started calling the middle classes. So Bournemouth are a really good example of it. Palace are running themselves really, really well at the moment. Obviously, you look at Brighton as probably the example of how to run a kind of mid-level club in the Premier League and be successful from it. And a lot of teams are sort of adopting that model of selling really well, rebuilding really well, and then just, rinse and repeat. And looking at Graham Potter's time since he left Brighton, it actually makes me wonder if it's even possible to do a bad job there, because they've just got everything set up so well around you that it's, it seems to function really, really well for everyone. So I think that is absolutely an element that is making the league feel very competitive this season. And I think the kind of like anyone can beat anyone in this league cliche has never really been true. It's something we used to hear people say all the time in the Premier League. If if a manager had lost a game, they perhaps wouldn't have expected to. But there is certainly an element that these teams are they are way, way more than making up the numbers. And I do expect that before long, the familiar pattern will emerge, and there'll be a sort of a top level pulling away from everyone else. How many teams are in that is yet to be seen, isn't it? But I'd love it to be the case, but I just think it's too early to make a call like that.
Lars.
So Captain Wet Blanket again. Like I don't disagree with the idea that we have, like last year, this narrative about the rise of the clever middle of the three Bs, in particular Brighton, Bournemouth, and Brentford, who all seem to be like very cleverly run. Pound for pound gets a lot out of what they have, and a lot of podcast minutes and inches of columns were devoted to this last season, and not mistakenly so. But after all of that, at the end of the season, where did they end up? Brighton were 8th, and Bournemouth were 9th, and Brentford were 10th. So that's not like super far away from where we would kind of expect. Like, I agree that these are smarter and better run clubs than what we had like maybe 15 years ago, when you had like all kinds of random stuff in the middle of the Premier League, like teams managed by Steve Bruce, all kinds of obscenities. But also just, I also just think Man United finished 15th and Spurs finished 17th. That was the big thing that happened last year. If they were like in the sort of top 8, as you'd expect, then Brighton would have been pushed down to 10th. Bournemouth would have been 11th. Fulham, it would have just been more of what we expect. So I think we may have over-egged the best practice pudding a little bit about how genius. I just think there's a limit to what you can do with the budgets these teams are working on.
I agree with you. Being a Fulham fan, I do agree with you. Having seen that play out a few seasons now, and I'm happy with mid-table. Do you know what I mean? You want more, but realistically, Lars, you know, again, how many times have I said this on this podcast? To be the 10th best team or the 11th best team in England is an achievement. Clearly, if that, context is needed there, because if Liverpool finish 11th, they'll be disappointed. But, it's very hard to push into those Champions League, Europa League places, which is why that Nottingham Forest season under Nuno seems so remarkable. But if you're framing it as perhaps CJ was a little bit with regard to challenging for the title, I still think this is a two-horse race. I don't put Man City in there. I think Man City will be third. I think they could do. They could prove us wrong. When was it? 2 seasons ago, when Jurgen Klopp in his final season at Liverpool, whenever that was, if it, my memory is correct, Man City win the league. Arsenal very, very close, and Liverpool were pretty close up until the kind of final stages, and that was a good title race, you would say. Of course, we have been conditioned now to see one team just run away with it, as Liverpool sort of did a bit last season.
Which is real recency bias, isn't it?
Yeah,
because
it is.
The seasons, like the 2 seasons before that, were very, very tight.
Yeah, but they were tight with 2 teams. So again, the idea that you're going to get more than 3 teams going for a title, I think is. How many times has that happened in the history of the top flight in England?
Very few.
Exactly. Because as I say, that season with Klopp's last season, when we had 3 teams going for it, we were all going, blimey, get a load of this. This is quite rare, because we were used to Liverpool and Man City going for it, and then obviously Arteta and Arsenal challenging as well with Man City. If you get 2 teams in a title race, that can be quite exciting. For me, it's either Liverpool or Arsenal this season. Man City are distinctly the 3rd best team, and I think that's where they will finish. The idea of Chelsea or Newcastle or Spurs mounting a title bid this season, I wouldn't agree with that. I do think the European places, though, Lars, I think that's an interesting kind of conversation, because who's going to finish 4th and 5th? I think that's really difficult to call this year.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting discussion, because there are teams there that, like, I don't trust Thomas Frank's Tottenham just quite yet. United continue to be something of a mess. And
mentioning
Newcastle,
Man United there seems ridiculous to me, by the way.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like we kind of have to. I concur with you, though, because there is this soup of teams. Like I think we agree Arsenal, Liverpool, and City are still the top 3 in this league, with Chelsea as the kind of aspirational 4th. I think
maybe
that's
Newcastle?
still the grouping.
Chelsea,
maybe.
Newcastle.
But I would kind of put them in the soup after that, where you've got like Spurs, possibly United, Newcastle. I thought Villa would be in the soup, but the early season form suggests they're maybe not soup worthy.
They need to get back into the soup.
They do.
That's what they need to do. They need to get. 2 wins now. Maybe they're back on track, but I believe in Emery's capacity to dump them straight back in the soup. But that soup is very soupy. I think if we're gonna have England getting 5 Champions League spots again, which I would expect, the battle for the 5th one I think could be wild, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Forest aren't in the soup.
No, Forest are out of the soup. They've unsouped themselves.
I worry that their soup days have gone for the foreseeable future.
Forest are more like soup that's already been digested.
Yeah,
at this stage.
I think there are some people.
What's another word for that, Jim? When the soup has been digested and what's left emerges from your body.
There are some who suggest that definitely Crystal Palace and maybe even Everton under David Moyes, Jim, could be could be souping themselves up this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of teams who look like they've not had a sort of significant setback yet. You know, I think Palace and Everton are a great example of that. Teams where you think, oh, they're on a really, really good run of form. But it's just whether or not it's sustainable, isn't it? And I just go back to the point I made earlier. When the games start coming thick and fast, some of these teams will start losing games and they will drop points. So essentially, in 10 games' time, the form that every single team in the Premier League is in right now is irrelevant, isn't it? It moves really quickly, and we forget it every season. But it's I think we're just too early to be able to kind of make realistic predictions about it. Any of those teams in that soup.
So I think we're all kind of agreed on CJ's question that it doesn't feel like, certainly in terms of the title challenge, it feels like kind of similar to what we've seen in recent seasons, probably a 2-horse race. A 3-horse race is quite a rare thing. But maybe, Lars, though, the thought of Liverpool and or Arsenal getting 93, 95, 97 kind of points this season, maybe that you could win the Premier League this season with 80-something points.
Yeah, I think that's a succinct analysis. I think it's fascinating between them two, if we have time to make another point on it, is that I feel like they're kind of the opposite in that I still think Liverpool's ceiling is super high with this group of players they've put together.
It is. I should jump in here, Lars, and I appreciate that Liverpool won the Premier League with 84 points last season. With Arsenal being 10 points behind them.
Yeah.
So I want to make that point before people think, well, hang on, last season you didn't see a 90-plus points.
I think the point is more, no one's getting to the mid-90s this season.
No.
That's
probably
kind of
not. Yeah, I mean,
I can't see that at all.
No, because Liverpool and Man City have both lost twice already.
Yeah.
And that leaves you kind of a little, not very much room to manoeuvre there, doesn't it? I did think at the start of the season, certainly looking at Liverpool's squad, and perhaps it will all click and perhaps they'll turn it around, that this looks like a 90-plus point squad.
But I think that's what we've been conditioned. I think maybe that's what CJ is, when he said recent title challenges have felt miles clear of the rest. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
When you get those, they're in the 90-point margin. Could we even see a real throwback, Lars, of a team winning the points within a 70-point plus range? Ooh, that would be a real throwback.
Spicy.
That was lovely.
I actually agree with Jim. I do think Liverpool have assembled a potentially some 90-plus point season squad. I just think they might need a year to get to know each other first before they get there. I think that's what we're kind of figuring out now. I think their ceiling is super high. I think they will. I think this is a team that will beat someone 5-6-7-0 at some point because all these attackers will just figure it out and run wild. But I also just think as we're
going there.
But I think we're also seeing it's taking them a little while to gel and they're dropping some points. Whereas Arsenal are kind of the opposite. Like, I think Arsenal's floor is super high because they're so good defensively. Like, they're so rugged and solid, and there'll just be a few games here and there when the attack doesn't pop off. But now that they have more options to throw in from the bench, Whereas City, I'm kind of weirdly unconvinced by almost everything about City right now, except for Erling, who's back in total freak mode.
Oh my God.
And is just not a manageable player at the moment.
Can't even say that's Norwegian bias, can you?
No, you can't. I mean,
he's so good right now, and it's amazing.
Did you hear what he said about Brentford at the weekend? He was saying I was a little bit tired before the game, but the centre half started pushing me around a bit. That motivated me to just turn it on. It's like just on. Oh God, the goal he scored was outrageous. The strength of him. I know we essentially talk about this every week, but every week it's notable.
The thing about Erling as well. So last season there was a lot going on for him, and I don't think he's spoken about it publicly because he's not a guy who will ever make excuses for anything. But I don't know if it was widely reported, but one of the people closest to him in his life passed away last year. Ivar Egge, who was his father's best man at his wedding, was basically like an uncle to Erling. And as someone Erling has said, this is the guy I feel the most relaxed with off the pitch. And he spent a lot of time with him. He passed away from illness. Erling then had his first child, which is something that, I think is kind of, obviously he has maybe more resources and more help than some of us fathers listening, but it can disrupt your life in ways you maybe not prepared for. And then City obviously had a bad year, so a lot of stuff was going on. And he still scored 22 goals. Like that's like his floor in the Premier League is a 20-goal season. Now he's looking like himself again, and it's so scary, but also very good. If you want to buy a book about him, there's one out there.
There's loads of books out there, but one in particular that we would recommend, Lars. I feel we're going to mention Erling Haaland later on in the show, so put a pin in him. And we're going to go for a break. And coming up after this, underrated players and underrated anthems.
Triggs has been in touch on Instagram. I don't think this is the ghost of Roy Keane's dog. But I also can't confirm that. Triggs says, hello lads, who do you think is the most underrated Premier League player of the decade so far? For me, not that you asked, but you're welcome to submit, Triggs, it would have to be Jordan Pickford, arguably Everton's greatest ever keeper alongside Neville Southall, who without a doubt ensured their Premier League status for 2, if not 3 separate seasons. Outrageously good clean sheet record, and he's been a mainstay for England throughout, putting in memorable performances in major tournaments. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
It's nice to hear Pickford get a mention there.
Absolutely.
Because I think because he can be quite hectic and crazy, you immediately think, you can't trust him.
And it's easy to project that onto him in a fun way as well, isn't it? The idea that like because he's often like shouting at his defenders, and you get the memes about him being annoyed at having to do any single part of his job. It's tempting to sort of make it seem like he's a lot more of a chaotic character than he actually is.
I think if he played his football in South America, they'd think he was a very quiet, conservative character. And I think in this country, maybe we're used to goalkeepers just kind of getting on with it and not showing much. I mean, I loved that moment for England in the Euros when England were playing Switzerland, and Xherdan Shaqiri, of course he did, tried to score from the corner, which came back off the bar. Now, I reckon Pickford had it covered, but Pickford turns around and looks at Shaqiri, gives him the thumbs up and a wink as if to say, it was a good try that was.
Yeah.
Like, you don't expect that from...
Well done, Power Cube.
Yeah, you don't expect that from goalkeepers. So I'm glad he's been mentioned there by Triggs. It's a difficult question, this one, because there's certain players you immediately go to and you think, but they are kind of rated.
Yes.
And so is anyone sort of truly underrated these days? Because I think the underrated player police are often out in force, aren't they?
Yeah.
That if
you're well funded, that police force, they've got new cars and everything, water cannons, it's all going off.
Lots of members as well. There's tons of them.
Yes.
They can identify anyone who does not know ball.
Yeah. And I would say...
The number of players whom the streets will not forget is becoming quite...
I think we need to start forgetting players. There are players
the
we just
needs
need
to develop some sort of forgetfulness again.
Crowded out there.
The streets are acting like 24/7 news coverage. At some point it'll be saturated. We need to scale back on this. But once the horse is bolted, it's very, very difficult, of course.
And this also gives rise to something I once tried to dub the Lee Carsley syndrome, which is a player who is underrated for a while, and then everyone discovers at the same time that he's underrated, to the point where he kind of becomes overrated. Yeah,
you're right. It's a massive pylon as well. But you also see this in certain former footballers being interviewed, and I'm not going to start naming names because it must be lovely talking about, if you're a former footballer, talking about your career and saying, you know what, actually, maybe I did have more talent than people sort of give me credit for, and here's some. But then you do hear one or two of them saying certain things about,
I was much better than Wayne Rooney when I was a teenager.
Well, no, I wasn't looking at Michael Owen. Michael Owen had a fine career, and without injury, goodness knows what he could achieve. But yeah, anyway, so I don't want to start having a go at people. But anyway, get back to the question, Triggs. The underrated Premier League player of the decade.
So of the decade is what makes this tricky.
The decade is tricky because otherwise, presumably, we'd all say Claude Makélélé, wouldn't we? N'Golo Kanté, maybe. I was thinking this the other day, that a player who we thought was going to move from the Premier League by now, but he's still there and he's still putting in performances. And again, I think he is well rated, but just trying to sort of maybe get this is Kieran Trippier. I was going to mention, only because in the wider context of Trippier's career, because of Kyle Walker at England, he was maybe overlooked a bit, and I understand that.
He played a decent amount of games for England.
But he did play a decent amount of games for England. And obviously in the previous...
decade.
I was going to say the previous Euros, or the last Euros rather, he was played on that left side and was given a lot of stick. But he did actually play... In terms of a solid defence, England didn't concede. It was going forward where they were completely unimaginative without kind of re-going over all that. But I think what Trippier has done since he's been at Newcastle United, I think those fans up there in Newcastle, they very much value what he's done, would be my guess. But he went in at a time when, I remember saying, like, what on earth is he doing going to Newcastle? He's at Atletico Madrid playing in the Champions League. Newcastle were in a relegation scrap at the time. But him going in there, his leadership and experience was a huge part of Newcastle. Yes, the other signings as well and so on, but getting them to kind of where they are now. He was great in the League Cup final. And this is when Trippier stopped playing for England. again, I was one, and a lot of people, there was talk of him moving on, wasn't there? And I know with the emergence of Livramento and one or two other players they had, they thought, oh, he's probably not going to play that much. But he ends up staying there and not getting a move. And is still, I think, maybe not the most crucial part of that team anymore, but he still plays his part.
Oh, but he is a massive reference point for essentially everybody in that squad. He's a leader, and he kind of leads by technical example as well as kind of the kind of application and the attitude.
Yeah, and I think he was one of the first players to go there with this new regime and with Eddie Howe in charge, and really, I think, capture the imagination of some of. I don't want to talk on behalf of the fans. I'm not one, as you all know, but that's the impression I get. But also as well for England, I think he was a really important player, and can play, like starting as wing back in the Euros final in 2020, but summer of 2021. He played in a few different positions, and also as well. I know that the question was specifically Premier League, but he did go to Atletico Madrid in 2019, and he won the league there. And I just think maybe he's slightly. There might be a tinge of being
underappreciation.
Maybe I'm not saying Kieran Trippier is the best right back England have ever had. I'm trying not to overrate him at the same time, Lars. But I think what he achieved this decade, winning La Liga, being a big part of the England squad, which has reached 2 finals this decade, and being a part of Newcastle United, who have gone on to play Champions League football and won the League Cup as well. I think it's a difficult question, but I would say trips for Triggs' question.
There was this moment where he was linked with the move to Bayern to join Harry Kane and Eric Dyer,
Yes.
and I really wish that had come off.
Well, Lars, now you're talking.
Just assembling a stag do in Bavaria by stealth. Let's just gradually getting them in.
And Sir Gareth in charge at some point? Kebab.
Oh, good Lord.
Jim, who are you going to say for this?
Well, it is a tricky one, isn't it? Because of the nature of picking somebody from this decade, and also the nature of them having to somewhat go under the radar when there's so much scrutiny on players now. But I think actually staying with Everton, James Tarkowski has been quite underrated.
Ooh.
And has been an absolutely integral part of seeing Everton through some really tricky, difficult times. I mean, if you look back to the 2-2 draw that Everton had with Liverpool last season, and he gets that late winner. Now, obviously, that's not the kind of be all and end all of his time there, or really what he's expected of him for most of his time, but it's a kind of example of what a leader he's been for them, and a reference point again for that whole team. He's absolutely solid.
It felt right that he scored that goal.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's a bit of a talisman there. But I think he's one of those players that people don't really appreciate quite how important he is to that team.
Yeah, he also was a part of Burnley's teams that stayed in the Premier League longer than most people perhaps would have thought. I understand he gets relegated with them in his final season there, and then goes to Everton. But yeah, I think he's very much been a steady presence in what's been quite a chaotic time for Everton, Lars, in these last few seasons with manager changes and financial worries and so on. I mean, what would you think about James Tarkowski to the answer to that question?
I actually want to talk about James Tarkowski in this segment, and I have a very particular reason for that, which is going a little bit into the weeds, but bear with me.
Weeds won't forget.
I remembered this morning, and I looked up the stats to make sure I was sure. So, in his 2 seasons in the Championship with Brentford, now hold on to your wigs and shoes. Like this is the thing. In his 2 seasons for Brentford in Championship, James Tarkowski was the centre half in the Championship who completed the most dribbles per game.
Love that.
This is true. Out of all the centre halves in the Championship, James Tarkowski was like the dribbler supreme. I'm not saying there were many dribbles, but it was more than the other guys. So clearly, I'd watch a ton of Brentford games at the time, but he must have been a player who stepped into midfield and was comfortable with the ball and was
they
like
called
more
him
of a
Franz
ball-playing
Brentford
guy.
Bauer.
Of course. But then, of course, when he makes his move from Brentford, he first goes to Burnley, is not a regular in their promotion season, but then wins the place, becomes a regular the next season in the Premier League, and then has a long career there. And because of the nature of the way Burnley play and the kind of coach Sean Dyche is, he becomes this kind of meat and potatoes defender who's very good at that. But because he does that thing, he's never considered by the big clubs, because they look around and they think, oh, well, we need a defender who's a good passer, who's comfortable with the ball. And because his instructions was to not do that at all, just get rid of it, knock it long, all this sort of stuff, he never gets the big move after that. And I remember when United signed Harry Maguire, I think I said at the time, like, Harry Maguire's fine, but is he like 70 million? Like, are we sure he's that much better than someone like James Tarkowski? And I kind of maintain, if he had gone to a club where he had been encouraged to keep playing, being a little bit more ball playing, using his ability, rather than sort of become this sort of dog of war, combative, win your 50s and get it away from here player, I think he could have had a bigger move to a bigger club. And I know Harry Maguire has become a kind of a figure of fun, but the guy's played 250 games for Man United and has 64 caps from England. Like, that's not a bad career.
Yeah.
And I don't think, in terms of ability, there's any reason why Tarkowski couldn't have had that career, really. It's just that football is a little bit about timing and luck in the moves you end up making. And I agree. I think he's been a very, very good player who's a little bit underrated.
Do you think, and this is, I suppose I'm sort of crowbarring this one into the question because his best years were undoubtedly in the Bundesliga. Granit Xhaka?
Yeah, I think that's a very good shout, actually, when you look at the full story of his time at Arsenal and the kind of the turnaround there, not just in terms of his relationship with the fans, but the exceptional increase in sort of output and quality and how he managed to weather that. And then obviously, I think the Bundesliga is absolutely relevant because, he's a player who's played here and then went to join not just any team, but this absolutely exceptional historic team of which he was a massive part of. One of the interesting things about that as well is that Arteta sort of changed his position a little bit at Arsenal when he started to thrive. It moved him a little bit further forward, and everyone was like, "This makes so much more sense." This actually suits his skill set, and those brilliant kind of line breaking passes that he's always been good at work really, really well there. And he goes to Leverkusen, and he sort of kind of goes back a little bit deeper into midfield again in the position that everybody thought he was, perhaps not at his best at, and he was exceptional there as well. So yeah, I think Xhaka's a really good shout.
All right, we could be here just starting naming players all day, but I think we've answered your question there, Triggs. But
also most Brentford players as well. Most Brentford players.
All the Danish dudes for Brentford in particular,
Yeah.
they seem to have just an unending supply of Danish guys who are just kind of there and are fine.
Yeah, I think we can all agree. And Jordan Henderson. Right, this is from Joe on email. He's got in touch. So he said, Friday's chat about Bayern's Can got me thinking. Now, we were talking about them on the preview show with their Yabba Dabba Doo and then the Can goal music. Joe asks, if you were able to steal a song associated with another club, in brackets, could be a chant, walking out music, goal music, Pompey's chimes, etc. You were to steal it for your own club. Which one would you pick? Personally, I'm extremely jealous of Newcastle United walking out of the tunnel to a theme from Local Hero by the great Mark Knopfler, which is a good one. It is a good one. It sends chills down the spine. It's so good. I wish we had something a quarter as good as that at Fulham. Well, I would say, Joe, obviously you're familiar with Craven Cottage as I would be, I quite like it at halftime when they come out to London's Calling by the Clash.
Yeah.
I think that's quite good.
Although Arsenal play London Calling as well. There's a sense it's a little bit impersonal, isn't there?
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, obviously Fulham are the original and best when it comes to London Football Club. So
Sure.
Arsenal, I think, have stolen that.
Probably.
But if I was to answer the question straight away, I really do, Lars. I really do quite like, is it Liquidator? The Chelsea one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I suppose I can...
That is good.
Yeah, it is good, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to sort of wipe off this Chelsea association in my mind, but you are correct. It is actually good.
Yeah, Vish and I were talking about the other day, and Vish was like, yeah, it is really good. Lars, any particular chant or anything?
Yeah, that's the Fulham fan, by the way, saying that the Chelsea music is very
I know,
good.
right?
So, I mean, that's a big thing. I do think
No cuck energy, that isn't it?
Lars, no doubt that you, as a Norway fan, because you're a Norwegian, that's how it works at the international level. You've gone local. You would probably love to steal 3 lines from us, wouldn't you? Because it's so brilliant.
So I've actually, this is uncanny because I was going to turn it over to international football.
There you go.
So you've read my mind there. But it isn't 3 lines. But don't clip this. Not going on social media. I don't want to be associated with this.
You don't have the choice on that
power, Lars.
God, the Swedes, man. The Swedish national team have a fantastic song. I hate to admit this. So last international break, a good friend of mine went away with the Swedish away fans because they were playing Slovenia and Kosovo. So somebody organized like a small tour of that part of the world where they kind of went to both of the games and had a few drinks and had a lot of fun in a big bus. And I saw one of his stories on Instagram where they were all just going mad. But they're all just going mad in a nightclub in Eastern Europe singing one of the Swedish sort of the songs that go with the national team. And I just had to message him, like, going, I obviously kind of hate you. I don't hate them. It's a very friendly rivalry, but like, I don't want to admit this, but that is an unbelievably good song. And it's the song they put out before the 1994 World Cup, which is probably why it has an even stronger, like, nostalgia resonance for them, because that was always a great tournament for Sweden. So that's like one of the best times to be a Sweden fan. And the title is something like När vi gräver guld i USA, like when we're going to the US to dig for gold.
Well, they got bronze. They weren't far off.
Yeah.
It is an incredible sort of mid-90s pop anthem that is so well written in the sort of, it's so catchy. It's absolutely tremendous, cheesy 90s nostalgia. And we have some good songs for our national team, Norway, as well, but we don't have anything that slaps quite so hard. So congratulations to Sweden, and that is very, very good.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a chant or a music or anything, but I am quite jealous for Sweden and Netherlands in particular, international level, because of the colours.
Yeah.
It really pops.
Yeah, it really,
white
really
is
does.
not good for that.
No, it's not. There's an arrogance to the white. Do you know what I mean?
It's more the flag.
That's
though,
how
isn't it?
it is, yeah. And it absolutely, of course, you're right to point that out, but it does feel a bit Real Madrid for me, wearing white. It's like, we are pure, we are the best. That's just how it's. I imagine that is how it can come across to other nations.
Do it down.
In terms of international football, I love the Icelandic thunderclap.
I thought that was boring.
Oh,
I
really?
didn't like it. I know that because they beat England. No, it's not. That's a bit basic for me.
But I don't think it is basic though. We'd never seen it before. It was a new thing, and I thought that was very cool the way that worked. On a club level, I really like "Glad All Over," the Palace song. Because it's got the claps in it, so it's kind of got that little moment.
You like claps, quite clearly.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So I thought that was great, but I think ultimately though, you've got to do your own thing, haven't you? Or you end up with a Poznan. It just if you've clearly lifted something from another club, it's just a bit lame.
Yeah, I don't take it too literally. I'm not, from Joe. You can play any of these tracks if you want. You can turn up to an England game in a Netherlands shirt if you want.
I wouldn't advise it.
No, that's fair. All right, coming up after this, one listener proposes a new World Cup format.
Dan has been in touch on email. Very traditional. He says, "Hi team, I get why the idea of a 64-team World Cup winds people up. More groups, more games, less jeopardy for the big nations, FIFA greed at work, etc. But it got me thinking, if the World Cup didn't exist at all and we had the chance to design it from scratch, wouldn't the most World Cup version of a World Cup be something closer to the FA Cup? A genuine global knockout where every FIFA member nation, 200 odd of them, not just 64, is in from the start, and maybe the higher ranked teams only enter in later rounds. It would be once every 4 years, but instead of years of pre-qualification and bloated group stages, you'd get pure jeopardy, proper cup magic, and the genuine possibility of shocks. Fewer games overall, but a much better spectacle. Of course, FIFA would hate it, less money to be made, but as a sporting concept, it feels like the most authentic world competition we could have. Let's ignore the logistical issues.
I can't.
Curious to hear what you think. Maybe you'll still hate it.
I tell you what, I admire that, Dan. Don't forget about that bit. Can you imagine in the 1930s when the World Cup comes along? You travel how many weeks on the boat?
But that's the whole point of Dan's question, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is to disregard all that stuff and think about it as a spectacle for the viewer. And I do think it's quite an interesting thing.
Well, but the spectacle for the viewer is, we spoke about this when Euro 2020 was across lots of different countries. Now, I don't think it was, obviously the way it worked out with COVID and lockdown and all that, but I didn't think it was the disaster that maybe we thought it was going to be. But there is something nice about having a tournament in one place, I think. So that goes out the window. So that is
Does it go out the window?
Well,
presumably it's being hosted in one place.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, but he hasn't specified that it isn't.
Well, okay. So all right, let's ignore the logistics then. I think that it would be an incredible spectacle to begin with. I wonder if it would get a bit old. I think that there's. So he's getting rid of qualification, presumably. Then,
yeah, everyone's just going all in.
Yeah, I just think that for a lot of people, I think it's just not enough games. Like, you go out in the first round, and that's not saying that as one of the bigger nations. The thing is with qualification, if people find it boring or they don't find it boring, or you are going to play a certain amount of games, and I think that's important for teams and fantasy, and that can build a fan base, and that can do all that. We come at that as England fans. Obviously, Lars isn't, so interested in his take. But as England fans, you come at that and think, qualification, England should breeze through or whatever. But most countries don't think like that. So I think those games are important. And then when you get to the tournament, with this 48-team World Cup, I understand that, we do have 3 games guaranteed. There was chat that it was only going to be 2 games guaranteed. And that felt a bit thin on the ground for me. And I would feel sorry for teams if they didn't get to watch their team at a World Cup 3 times. But the idea of, I just think, look at the Euros as well. When people say, well, you got a 24-team Euros, people say, well, when it was a 16-team Euros, every game was fiercely and keenly contested.
Yeah.
Germany against,
Fiji.
Do you know what I mean? Like the Marshall Islands or whatever. Like, I'm sorry, but
sure, but
you would have to wait a long time. It's like with sometimes with like the Europa League or even the Conference League. Sometimes you got to wait a bit.
This is exactly what it would be like, wouldn't it? Certainly, sort of the old format of the Europa League in particular, where it actually started to get really good later on.
I mean, yes, you could have a
obviously
shock.
the cream rises, but I think that is going to be the case.
Names out of a hat, yeah. When you got what was it, Portsmouth v Cardiff in the FA Cup final? There is a possibility for Mozambique v Australia in a World Cup final.
Yeah,
but I mean,
there isn't. Well, even with this format, there just absolutely isn't. But I think I do think it would become really fun as it got going, and it would be interesting, wouldn't it? Certainly as a one-off. I think if you look at the last World Cup, obviously Argentina going to win it, but they lost their opening game against Saudi Arabia. So in this format, they'd be gone, and
Spain
that would
2010
be
gone.
Yeah, exactly. That would be quite fun in its own way, because the groups give a level of security to the stronger nations, right?
Yeah.
Because if they do make a misstep early on, they've got a couple of opportunities to put it right. So
how many games have you got to play? That is more that out.
Yeah, I mean, that's
logistics out the way.
Yeah,
How
sure.
many games have you got to win to get to the final? Like, this is just.
But for that reason, though, right? The team that won it, you have to say, well, I mean, fair enough. Like you really have to. You are by the end of that tournament. You've got arrows sticking out of you. Your shield is bludgeoned to pieces. You are bleeding from everywhere, but you are holding that trophy
and
aloft.
Every single player has to retire through exhaustion or something. Lars, what do you reckon?
So I can't stop thinking about the logistics. I think if we were doing this and we had to assemble...
No, that's the thing!
No, I'm just saying, if we had to assemble 200 international squad in one country, let's assume there's a place that can accommodate that, I would want there to be a blind draw for who gets what hotels. So, like, it's just
Everyone
completely random. Yeah, no. All the hotels are just drafted in and say, you will have to host a squad. And then it can be a huge draft day event where you draw like this team gets to go to the Hilton, and that's like, oh wow, Fiji, you've gone to the Hilton, that's good for you guys. But then we get to like Brazil, and that's like, you're off to the abyss, that's slightly unfortunate for you. But then you get to like Germany, maybe someone has to go to like a hostel, and it'll just be they have to sleep in bunks and share a toilet. And that would add an element of jeopardy to proceedings. Imagine the fallouts you'd have if the French squad had to like stay in a hostel. That'd be I would love that.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're saying that, that the hotel should be in the draw and all the rest of it, you said, where would this tournament be played? Trump's America is your answer. Where it's going to be largely next summer.
You probably do have 200 nice hotels, so that's a very bad example. What you need is a country that only has like 2 or 3. Like, send them to Armenia or something. Like, that'd be great, just to see what happens.
Well, Dan, you've certainly got us talking on that one.
Yeah.
Call me a traditionalist. I think the idea has not got legs. But there we are. Right, we're going to finish with this question from friend of the Ramble, Fortislay on Discord. One for you, Jim. Are Norway finally making themselves the team they should be with their squad? They're currently top of their group for World Cup qualification, 6 points ahead of Italy, who have a game in hand. What do you reckon, Jim?
Yeah, if I can just take the lead on this one.
Yeah.
Just whack it to the big lad up top. I think they'll be all right. Legitimately.
That's all we've got time for, everybody.
Yeah. So if I can sort of redirect a question to Lars, obviously we know that Norway have some outstanding forward players that we're all very, very familiar with. But to the sort of more casual observer of Norway's international qualities, I'm not really familiar with more of their defensive players. And how do you feel about the national team on that side? Because we all know about the attacking talent, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But
No, you've very much hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I have been on so many radio shows and podcasts and been asked to explain why on earth this team isn't qualifying for tournaments because they have Holland, they have Odegaard. But the thing is, it's a strong generation for a small country. Don't get me wrong. It's incredible to have the best goal scorer in the Premier League, possibly the world, one of the best playmakers in the Premier League. That's wild when you're a country of 5 million people. Like that's not going to happen again in my lifetime. So I just have to appreciate that. But it's an uneven generation. Like we have played with this group. We played a playoff game against Serbia. That was a playoff for the Euros, Euro 22. It was back in 2020. Anyway, it was a playoff final against Serbia, in which we had a guy who started who was without a club. Our left back was just not with a club at the moment. So you had in the same lineup in an absolutely crucial game, Erling Haaland, Martin Odegaard, an unemployed man, which is like, okay, that
gives us
that can happen. I mean, there's no shame in being temporarily, without an income. It can happen to anyone, but it just kind of illustrates where we've been at times. And
Makes
it definitely
sound like
has
the
been.
manager's been searching the job centre for for people to fill in.
So this is the thing. So the big change now. What the guys in the squad are saying is that they've had a change of attitude in the last year. They've become they've had a change of the way they communicate internally. They're a bit harsher with each other. There's less kindness. People dig each other out a little bit more, and people take more responsibility. But I also just think we've found defenders who are a little bit more capable than what we've had before. And the big issue is finding a balance where, because you've got two of the best players are Erling Haaland and Alex Sørloth. So you've got the big man combo up front that you have to solve somehow.
What a horrendous time to be Morgan Strand Larsen. Of all the luck.
It's just annoying, isn't it?
He'd get 70 caps in any other generation.
It was like when Slovenia had two of the best keepers in the continent. You just be like, come on. Can one of you play a centre half,
It is unfortunate for him, but and then you also have to find a position, like, because you might be tempted to play 4-4-2 because of those two guys, but where does Martin Odegaard play in a 4-4-2 formation? That kind of doesn't work. So it's like finding a way.
The diamond.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
get
and
a diamond in there.
So that was Ståle Solbakken, the coach. His first ever game coaching Norway, he tried the midfield diamond, and it was a little bit of a disaster. So it's one of those things. I think he really wants to try to make it work because it would make a lot of sense, but it never really seems to work. We played sort of 4-3-3 against Italy in that incredibly important 3-0 win. So cathartic for the whole group. And got Spalletti fired. We beat them so hard they fired the coach. Always good. But in that game, the way they made it work was by basically telling Alex Sørloth, like, we're really sorry, Alex, but you're going to have to sacrifice for the team here. So he played right wing and worked unbelievably hard for a tall centre forward who's not 21 years old. Just running up and down the flank out of possession all game and still getting into the box to be a threat.
It's a challenge for a left back, that.
Yeah, because he is also huge.
But that's what they're going to have to do, Lars, aren't they? I mean, as Thierry Henry said to Gary Neville and Ian Wright and Roy Keane and co., when he played for Barcelona, he wasn't the main man. He was kind of farmed out wide and just told to stay out there. And he said, I may not be the main man, but I'm still in the band. He likened it to being Michael one club and then Tito in the Jackson 5 the next.
You and I were at the 2009 Champions League final, so we saw this close up. Henry's job was essentially confuse Rio Ferdinand, which on a football pitch is a lot harder than it is off of it.
Yeah, we could have taken care of him off the pitch.
Offered up very confusing bits of trivia during breaks in play.
But Lars, go back to Norway. It does seem interesting because if you look at their history of qualifying for tournaments, we can discard the 1938 round of 16 finish in the World Cup and move on to the 90s and the noughties, because they qualify for the World Cup in 94, of course, qualify for the World Cup in 98, and qualify for the Euros in 2000. So they were doing all right around then. We haven't seen them at a major tournament since Euro 2000, which is surprising considered. I mean, whatever, is World Cup qualification easier or harder than it was? I understand for a nation like Norway, you've mentioned of 5 million people, I think it's very difficult to qualify for a World Cup. I think, if you're in with France or, one of the big boys, it's very, very difficult. But the Euros have been an expanded tournament. We've seen Scotland there twice. We've seen Northern Ireland since this expanded tournament. At some point, surely this is, I'm not going to say golden generation because that would be stupid, but there must be expectation in Norway.
Yeah,
for-
I mean,
for
we
it.
have Scotland to thank for the fact that we weren't in the
Yes.
last Euros. That was them sort of briefly morphing into a very good team in the summer of 23, and then immediately turning back into a pumpkin afterwards, after they'd completely screwed our qualification campaign. Thank you, Scotland. We appreciate that. No, that was, we screwed up away to Georgia as well. Like I said, it's a generation, this group, that has the best players are incredible. Erling Haaland and Martin Ødegaard are probably our two best players of all time. Like, I mean, it's early to say that in their careers, but I will be very surprised if in sort of 5-6 years, when they're both in their 30s, then that it's not a clear case of them being our best two footballers ever. But we have had issues filling out the rest of the team, and we have had issues finding the correct balance between them two. Alex Solot, who's also very good, and now the super exciting Nusa, the winger, who's so sparkling at times as well. So it is a challenge for the coach, Ståle Solbakken. I think he's the right guy. He's been under pressure. I believe he's the best coach with a Norwegian passport out there, which is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer catching strays, I guess. But there we go.
Come on.
And I'm happy that he is in the job still, and I'm so glad he's had this sort of cathartic run of results now. I'm feeling very positive about the team in a way I haven't for many, many years. So it's cool right now. But it is really, the answer to the question is, yes, I think they're finally going to be good. And I think the reason is they're starting to find solutions to the issues that they've been struggling with for a few years.